Welcome to the Holistic Health Purana Nalam channel to learn many health-related issues.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
You know, health is not just physical health. It should be mental, emotional, and spiritual health. I will be talking about all these topics one by one in my future episodes.
That's a really vital approach.
In this episode, I will be talking about an important topic on mindfulness, the art of living in the present.
And it really is an art, isn't it?
It is. Allow the words in the podcast to permeate into your mind and realize your health is your real wealth.
Absolutely.
Kindly give your feedback and inform me on what topics you want me to talk. You can ask your doubts in the comments section.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you.
So, to really jump into this, I want you, the listener, to just imagine something for a second. You're sitting on your living room couch.
Right.
You're perfectly safe. The doors are locked. The temperature is fine. There is literally zero physical danger anywhere near you.
But your body doesn't know that.
Exactly. Your heart is racing. Your palms are like slightly sweaty. Your breathing is shallow.
Your muscles are completely coiled up.
Yes, so tightly you could snap a pencil.
Yeah.
On a biological level, your body is sounding this massive alarm, right? It's preparing you to fight for your life.
But there's no predator in the living room.
No, there's no emergency at all. There is only your brain vividly replaying this slightly awkward conversation you had with a coworker 3 days ago, or, imagining a deadline that's still 2 weeks away.
You're under attack in your own mind.
Exactly. And that is why this clinical guide by Professor Dr. Selvaraj is just so critical. If we pull up the visual companion, starting with slide 1, the tone is just set immediately.
It really is. The image is striking.
Yeah, we see this incredibly detailed, glowing human brain. It's illuminated, it's intricate. And the title on slide 1 says, Mindfulness and Total Wellness, Rewiring the Brain from Autopilot to Awareness.
The phrase rewiring the brain is the key there.
Right, because we aren't just talking about shifting a mood, we were talking about changing the actual hardware.
We are talking about neuroplasticity,
Yeah.
which is, the brain's literal physical ability to reorganize itself. It forms new neural connections throughout your entire life.
Which is wild, because didn't scientists used to think that once you hit adulthood, your brain was just done?
Oh, for decades. The scientific consensus was basically that your brain was a finished house. The concrete was poured, the walls were up.
And you were just stuck with the layout.
Exactly. If you had an anxious brain, well, you were just an anxious person. But modern neuroscience proved that wrong. The brain is not a static structure. It's highly malleable tissue.
So every time we focus our attention, we're literally changing the physical structure.
Yes. Every single time you deliberately shift your thought patterns, you are strengthening certain synaptic connections and weakening others. It's no different than lifting weights to build muscle.
Wow, so the stakes are way higher than just feeling a little calmer on a Tuesday. We're deciding the architecture of our own nervous system.
Precisely. And you can see how high those stakes are when we move to the next part.
Right. Moving on to slide 2, titled The Burden of the Wandering Mind. The visual here is pretty visceral.
It is. It perfectly captures that feeling of being overwhelmed.
Yeah, it's this dark silhouette of a person holding their head in their hands. And where the brain should be, there is this chaotic, tangled, glowing orange mess of lines.
A literal tangled web.
Exactly. And the slide breaks this burden down into physical and mental symptoms. On the physical side, we see shortness of breath, increased heart rate, excessive sweating, and chronic muscle tension.
And we really have to look closely at the mechanism causing those physical symptoms, because this is where the mind-body connection stops being like some abstract concept.
It becomes biological reality.
Yes. Why does a wandering mind actually cause you to sweat? To understand this, we have to look at the autonomic nervous system.
Specifically the sympathetic nervous system, right? The fight or flight response.
Right. And the control center for this response is the amygdala. It's an almond-shaped structure deep in the brain that acts as your internal threat detector.
But the amygdala evolved millions of years ago. It evolved to detect immediate physical threats, right? Like a rustling in the bushes.
Or a sudden loud noise, exactly. And here is the fatal flaw in our human operating system.
Oh, I know where this is going.
The amygdala cannot differentiate between a tangible, physical threat in your room and a highly vivid, imagined threat generated by your memory.
So when my mind wanders to a financial mistake I made last year.
Your conscious mind knows it's just a memory. But the amygdala just receives the raw data. Threat, danger, financial ruin.
And it just slams the panic button.
Instantly. It signals the hypothalamus, which triggers the pituitary gland, which sends an alert to your adrenal glands. Within milliseconds, your bloodstream is just flooded with adrenaline and cortisol.
So the body physically prepares for combat, even though the threat is literally just a thought.
Yes. Your heart rate violently increases to pump oxygen-rich blood to your muscles so you can run away. Your respiratory rate spikes.
Hence the shortness of breath.
Right. Your sweat glands activate to cool you down for intense exertion. Your muscles contract. But you aren't fighting a predator. You're just sitting in traffic.
So all that cortisol just sits there, marinating in your bloodstream.
And that explains the chronic physical exhaustion so many people feel.
Yeah, even when they haven't done anything physically demanding all day. But let's look at the mental burdens on slide 2, because one of them really stood out to me.
Which one?
Well, it lists chronic lack of focus, which makes sense, and a suffocating feeling of being trapped, which aligns with that fight or flight energy, but then it lists tinnitus, ringing in the ears.
Ah, yes.
How does thinking about a stressful deadline cause a physical ringing in my ear? I always thought tinnitus was from, like, standing too close to the speakers at a concert.
That's a very common assumption. And acoustic damage is a primary cause. But from a neurological perspective, chronic stress from a wandering mind can absolutely trigger or worsen tinnitus.
Really? How?
It comes down to something called sensory gating.
Sensory gating, like a literal gate in the brain that decides what information gets through.
Exactly like that. At any given moment, your nervous system is being bombarded by billions of bits of sensory data.
Like the temperature of the air or the feeling of my shirt.
Right, the hum of your refrigerator, and the baseline electrical activity of your own auditory nerve. Your brain cannot process all of that consciously. You'd go insane.
It would be way too much noise.
So it uses a filtering mechanism, a gate, to tune out the background noise.
So normally my brain is just turning down the volume on its own internal noise.
Yes, but when you are in a chronic state of stress, because your mind is constantly wandering to anxious scenarios, your nervous system is locked on high alert.
Because it thinks there's a bear nearby.
Right. And when you're in danger, the brain wants to hear absolutely everything. It wants to hear the twig snap in the dark. So it drops the sensory gate.
It lowers the threshold.
Yes, for what it considers important data. And when that filter malfunctions due to chronic anxiety, suddenly your conscious mind starts perceiving the normal internal electrical noise of your ears.
Oh, wow. So you start hearing a phantom ringing or buzzing.
Exactly. The brain is so desperate to protect you from an imaginary threat that it hypersensitizes your hearing.
Until you can hear your own neurological baseline, that is insane. And that creates a vicious feedback loop, doesn't it?
A terrible one, yes.
Because if I start hearing a ringing in my ears, I'm going to get more stressed about it,
Hmm.
which tells the amygdala the threat is getting worse, which keeps the gate open.
Precisely. And furthermore, you have to factor in the chronic muscle tension we talked about. When humans get stressed, they instinctively clench their jaw,
Oh, yeah, the TMJ area.
right? The masseter muscles and the neck muscles. That joint is located millimeters away from your inner ear structures.
So severe tension there physically impacts the nerves.
Yes, it compresses the trigeminal nerve and the auditory pathways, physically triggering tinnitus.
Okay, so let me get this straight. We have an imaginary thought that triggers a real hormone dump, which tenses a real jaw muscle, which compresses a nerve, which causes ringing in the ear, which causes more stress.
That is the exact biological catastrophe, yes.
Triggered entirely by an undisciplined mind, which forces us to ask, why is the mind doing this? Let's look at the biological root of the issue.
It's perfectly illustrated on the next slide.
Right. Moving on to slide 3, the problem, the brain's autopilot. The imagery shifts here. We see a brain with this fiery, aggressive orange energy pulsing through its core.
And that slide introduces a very important term, the default mode network, or DMN.
The DMN, what exactly is that?
Well, the discovery of the DMN radically changed our understanding of human consciousness. In the late 90s and early 2000s, neuroscientists were using fMRI machines to study the brain.
To see what lights up when we do things.
Exactly. The standard protocol was to have a subject do a complex task, like a math problem, and then have them rest.
And the researchers assumed that during the rest period, the brain's activity would just drop.
Yes. They figured if you aren't actively thinking about a math problem, the brain shouldn't be working hard. It should be like putting a computer in sleep mode.
But I'm guessing that wasn't the case.
Not at all.
Oh.
The fMRI data showed the exact opposite. When subjects stopped focusing and just rested, a massive interconnected network of brain regions suddenly lit up.
Wow.
It was burning through a staggering amount of glucose. The brain was actually highly active when they thought they were doing nothing.
So what was the brain doing when it was supposedly resting?
It was time traveling.
Time traveling.
Yes. Researchers discovered that this network, the default mode network, acts as the brain's baseline autopilot. It turns on the exact second your active focus turns off.
And what is its function?
As Dr. Selvaraj outlines, it's relentless. The DMN forcefully pulls the conscious mind backward to analyze past regrets, or it projects the mind forward to anticipate future fears.
So it's basically responsible for self-referential thinking.
Cool.
I think the best way to visualize the DMN is to imagine an incredibly powerful but totally rogue air traffic control system.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Right, like you just want to sit on the runway and enjoy the weather. But the moment you take your hands off the steering wheel, this rogue system forcefully hijacks your plane.
It doesn't ask for permission.
Exactly. It throws you into a holding pattern over your past, making you circle your most painful failures over and over. Or it launches you into a storm cloud of future scenarios, dodging hypothetical disasters.
Disasters that haven't even happened.
Right. You're never allowed to just land the plane in the present moment.
That captures the lack of autonomy beautifully. You are literally a passenger to your own neurology.
And the result, according to slide 3, is persistent distraction, cognitive confusion, and chronic stress.
Which brings up a really important question. Why would human beings evolve an autopilot that tortures them with anxiety?
Yeah. From an evolutionary standpoint, that seems like a terrible design flaw. If an organism wastes massive energy torturing itself with imaginary fears, shouldn't it be outcompeted by an organism that just relaxes?
In our modern context, it absolutely looks like a flaw. But on the prehistoric savanna, the default mode network was a masterpiece of survival engineering.
Really? How so?
Well, if you were a hunter-gatherer, your survival depended entirely on extracting lessons from the past and anticipating dangers in the future.
Oh, I see.
The humans who just relaxed in the present moment, who enjoyed the sunshine, and didn't obsess over the lion attack from last week.
Those humans got eaten.
Exactly. They got eaten. The humans whose DMN forced them to obsessively replay the lion attack and forced them to scan the future for famine survive.
They survived to pass on their genes.
We are the descendants of the most anxious, paranoid apes on the planet. The DMN kept us alive.
But the environment changed so drastically, and the brain didn't have time to catch up. I mean, we don't live in a world of acute physical threats like lions anymore.
No, we live in a world of constant, abstract, low-level threats.
Yeah, we have a 24-hour news cycle designed to trigger fear, social media algorithms designed to trigger comparison, work emails pinging us at midnight.
Exactly. We are feeding this ancient, paranoid network with a fire hose of modern anxieties. The machine just spins its wheels forever, generating endless inflammation.
Which brings us to the ultimate biological question. How do we fix it?
That is the multi-million-dollar question.
Right. If we're fighting millions of years of evolution, how do we take the controls back from this rogue autopilot? Turning to slide 4, the solution, the awareness center, we get our answer.
And the visual shift here.
It does. It shifts from that fiery orange core to the front part of the brain, glowing with a bright, clear, calm white light. This introduces the prefrontal cortex, or the PFC.
If the default mode network is the rogue autopilot, the prefrontal cortex is the highly trained, deliberate executive command center.
So it's the anti-DMN.
Essentially, yes. It's the most recently evolved part of the human brain, located right behind your forehead.
And what does it do?
It is responsible for sustained focus, logical reasoning, impulse control, emotional regulation, and conscious decision-making.
This slide explicitly lays out the shift, it states. Through targeted mindfulness practice, we manually shift neural control away from the DMN and into the prefrontal cortex.
Yes.
I really want to focus on that word manually because it implies labor. It doesn't sound easy.
It implies immense labor. The brain is fundamentally an energy-conserving organ. It accounts for about 2% of your body weight, but consumes 20% of your body's energy.
Wow, mostly glucose, right?
Glucose and ATP, yes. The brain wants to save energy whenever possible. The DMN is the path of least resistance.
Because it requires almost no effort to just let your mind wander and worry.
Exactly. The prefrontal cortex, however, is a massive energy hog. To activate the PFC, to hold your attention deliberately on a single point, requires significant metabolic resources. It takes willpower.
So, to use an automotive analogy, this isn't about pushing a button and letting cruise control take over. It's the neurological equivalent of driving a manual transmission car up a steep hill.
That's a great way to look at it.
Yeah, like with an automatic transmission, the DMN, The car decides when to shift gears. It reacts blindly. But to switch to a manual transmission, the PFC, you have to actively engage.
You have to push the clutch in.
Right. You physically move the stick, listen to the RPMs, and coordinate everything to find the exact right gear for the present moment.
It takes intense focus.
And you might stall the engine a few times while learning, but ultimately you dictate the power and direction of the vehicle.
That is a phenomenal breakdown of the mechanics. When you first begin practicing mindfulness, it feels exhausting. It feels frustrating.
Because you're stalling out.
Yes.
Yeah.
You sit down to focus on your breath, and within 4 seconds, the DMN hijacks the car, and you're thinking about your grocery list.
Yep, every time.
But every single time, you notice your mind has wandered, and you made the deliberate, manual choice to pull your attention back. You're doing a neurological bicep curl.
Oh, I love that. A bicep curl for your brain.
You are physically strengthening the neural pathways of the PFC. Over time, that manual shift becomes faster and more intuitive.
And the result, as slide 4 promises, is living entirely in the present moment, achieving crystal clear thinking, and finding profound inner peace.
Which is what everyone is really looking for.
But I have to ask, if the PFC brings this incredible clarity and the DMN brings anxiety, why doesn't the brain just prefer the PFC naturally?
Because, again, evolution does not care about your inner peace. Evolution only cares about survival.
Right. Happiness doesn't keep you alive in a hostile environment.
Anxiety does. Inner peace makes you complacent. Mindfulness is essentially an evolutionary hack.
An evolutionary hack? That's fascinating.
It's us using the most advanced part of our brain to look at the primitive part and say, I acknowledge you are trying to protect me, but there is no tiger in this conference room.
I am manually overriding the alarm system now.
Yeah.
That totally reframes the concept of mindfulness. It's not just a relaxation technique, it's a rebellion against our own primitive biology. So let's deconstruct how we actually execute this hack. Moving on to slide 5, deconstructing mindfulness. We have this very elegant 3-part Venn diagram with overlapping glowing circles.
This is where Dr. Selvaraj moves us from theory into execution.
Let's examine the first circle, present moment awareness. The source defines this as being fully anchored in the now without passing judgment on the experience.
That phrase is critical.
I want to stop right there on the phrase without passing judgment because I genuinely believe this is the trapdoor where 90% of people fail.
Oh, absolutely.
A listener decides they want to reduce stress. They sit in a chair, close their eyes, try to focus. 10 seconds later, their DMN fires up and they're worrying about a credit card bill.
And instantly, the judgment kicks in.
Right. They think, I am so bad at this. I can't even focus for 10 seconds. My brain is broken. And just like that, the attempt at mindfulness has generated more stress and self-loathing.
That is the ultimate irony of beginner mindfulness. The judgment itself is the default mode network sneaking back in through the back door.
The DMN loves to criticize.
It does, even if it's criticizing your attempt to quiet the DMN. The key is realizing the goal isn't a perfectly blank mind. The brain secretes thoughts the way the stomach secretes acid.
It's just what the organ does.
Exactly. The goal is to notice the thought, acknowledge it neutrally, and manually bring the focus back.
Which leads perfectly into the second circle. Conscious versus subconscious. We use the logical conscious mind to regulate the automatic reactions of the subconscious.
And that brings us to the third circle, which explains how to do that without judgment. Acceptance of thoughts.
The slide describes it as stepping back to act as a witness, watching thoughts pass by without fighting them. But how do we translate that into a practical mental model?
Let's use a modern analogy. Imagine you're an air traffic controller sitting in a glass tower.
Okay.
Your conscious awareness is the tower, and the radar screen in front of you is your mind. Suddenly, a little blip appears on the radar. That blip is a thought.
Like, I'm going to fail my presentation tomorrow.
Right. The DMN wants you to believe that you are that airplane. It wants you to identify completely with the thought, jump into the cockpit, grab the controls, and fly into a panic.
The DMN makes you merge with the thought. You don't say, I'm experiencing a thought about failure. You just say, I am a failure.
Exactly. But the witness state, the air traffic controller, does not identify as the airplane. The controller just sits in the tower, looks at the radar, and says, ah, I see a Boeing 747 of anxiety entering my airspace.
It's requesting permission to land. I am going to deny clearance.
Yes. You just watch the blip fly across the screen and eventually disappear off the edge of the radar. You don't fight the plane. You just acknowledge its presence, Refuse to engage and watch it leave.
You create a gap between the stimulus and your response.
That space is everything.
It's the realization that you are not the voice in your head, you are the awareness listening to the voice. That's a profound paradigm shift.
It really is.
But how do we practice this when we aren't just sitting quietly? How do we integrate this into a chaotic daily schedule?
That brings us to the first practical protocol.
Let's get into the practical protocols with slide 6. Protocol 2, mindful eating. And just as a quick note to our listeners, Protocol 1 was the foundational establishment of that present moment awareness we just discussed.
Right, so this is where we take the theory of the air traffic control tower and apply it to a daily biological necessity.
We all have to eat multiple times a day, which means built-in opportunities to train the PFC. The slide shows this incredibly crisp, high-definition image of an apple and outlines 3 strict steps.
Step 1, engage the 5 senses. Fully observe the smell, color, and textures of your food before eating.
Step 2, deliberate chewing. Chew every single bite 20 to 40 times, forcing a slower pace.
And step 3, the digital detox. Absolutely no external inputs, no TV, phones, or screens while eating.
Okay, I have to step in here and challenge this on behalf of our listeners.
Go ahead.
Engaging the senses and turning off the phone sounds great, but chewing one single bite of food 40 times?
It sounds like a lot.
Think about an emergency room nurse on a 15-minute lunch break, or a parent wrangling 3 toddlers. Telling them to count to 40 for every bite sounds impossible. It sounds like something only a monk has time for.
That is a completely valid reality check. In an acute emergency, sure, survival dictates you consume calories however you can, but we must examine the physiological mechanism here.
It's not just arbitrary torture.
No, it's a specific intervention designed to sever the gut-brain stress loop. When that nurse or that parent is scarfing down food while staring at a phone, their nervous system is locked in sympathetic drive.
Fight or flight.
Yes, the body literally thinks it is eating while running from a bear.
And how does the digestive system react when the brain thinks a bear is chasing it?
Well, the brain is highly efficient. If you were running from a bear, digesting your lunch is not a biological priority. Surviving the next 10 minutes is.
That makes sense.
So the sympathetic nervous system forcibly shunts blood flow away from your gastrointestinal tract and redirects it to your skeletal muscles. Your stomach stops producing adequate acid.
Gut motility just slows down.
Exactly. If you force food into your stomach under these conditions, it sits there, ferments, causes massive inflammation, bloating, and poor nutrient absorption.
So it's the classic scenario where you eat a giant sandwich at your desk while stressing over a spreadsheet, and an hour later you feel physically ill.
Precisely. Now look at the intervention, chewing 20 to 40 times. The physical act of prolonged, deliberate chewing is a mechanical trigger for the vagus nerve.
The vagus nerve, the superhighway connecting the brain to the gut.
Yes. When you slow down, remove the digital screens, and focus entirely on the physical sensation of chewing, the vagus nerve sends a powerful signal to the brain. We are safe. We are stopping to process food. There is no bear.
And that flips the switch.
It deactivates the sympathetic nervous system and activates the parasympathetic nervous system, known as rest and digest. The brain routes blood flow back to the digestive organs.
And doesn't digestion actually begin in the mouth anyway?
Yes. Saliva contains an enzyme called amylase, which breaks down carbohydrates. By chewing 40 times, you're mechanically pulverizing the food and mixing it with amylase, taking a massive burden off your stomach.
So the actual act of tracking up to 40 is what forces the prefrontal cortex to engage. You can't let the DMN wander if your working memory is actively counting chews.
Exactly. You are starving the DMN of bandwidth. The result is superior digestion, increased dietary satisfaction, and healthy weight management.
Because it gives your brain the 20 minutes it needs to receive the hormonal satiety signals telling you you're full. It transforms a rushed chore into a dedicated training session.
It really does.
But what about the physical toll that stress takes on our muscular system? Transitioning to slide 7, protocol 3, anatomical body scan. The visual is an anatomical human figure showing musculature with glowing horizontal lines scanning down the body.
If mindful eating is about hijacking a biological routine, the body scan is about aggressively intervening in the physical feedback loop of stress.
And the protocol here is brilliant in its clinical precision. It's not just about trying to relax.
No, it's a highly structured cognitive and physiological task.
The slide outlines 3 specific steps. First, directed focus. Systematically move your mental attention through each muscle group, starting from the toes to the head.
Second, intentional tension. Intentionally squeeze and tense a specific muscle area as tightly as possible for 5 seconds.
And third, release and observe. Completely relax the muscle for 3 seconds, paying close attention to the physiological sensation of the release.
Notice the rigidity of the timing. 5 seconds of extreme tension, 3 seconds of acute observation.
The precision is the point. I think we need to actually feel the mechanism rather than just discuss it.
I agree. Let's do a walkthrough.
If you are listening to this right now and you are in a safe place, obviously don't close your eyes if you're driving. Let's do a quick 10-second version of this protocol.
Let's focus on the shoulders, the trapezius muscles. That's where we store an enormous amount of defensive stress.
Okay, on the count of 3, I want you to pull your shoulders up toward your ears and squeeze the muscles as violently tight as you possibly can. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Pull them up. Squeeze. Hold it for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now drop them instantly. Release everything.
And for the next 3 seconds, put 100% of your mental focus on the sensation flooding into that space. Feel the warmth, the heaviness, the rush of blood returning.
If you just did that, pay attention to the stark contrast you are experiencing right now. Why does that feel so profoundly different than simply telling yourself to relax your shoulders?
Because before you squeezed them, you probably didn't even realize they were tense.
Right. It's like turning on a massive floodlight in a dimly lit room. The contrast forces you to see the reality of the space.
That is the exact biological mechanism at play, involving proprioception and muscle spindle fibers. Throughout the day, as your DMN worries about emails, your brain sends a constant low-grade signal to your muscles to tense up.
Like a 3 out of 10 on the tension scale?
Yes. Because it is constant, your brain habituates to it and tunes it out. You lose conscious awareness of how tight you are, but the muscles are still burning energy and accumulating lactic acid.
So by intentionally spiking that tension to a 10 out of 10 for 5 seconds, you overload the receptors.
And when you release it, the receptors fire a massive, undeniable signal to the brain that the muscle is now at a 0. You force the nervous system to recalibrate its baseline.
And the slide makes a massive clinical claim about this. It states that it eradicates chronic physical pain and deeply embedded insomnia.
Yes, it does.
I understand the pain reduction, but curing insomnia, that is one of the most stubborn conditions in modern society. How does squeezing your calf muscles cure a sleep disorder?
To understand the cure, we have to accurately define the disease. What is modern insomnia? It is rarely a purely physical inability to sleep. Insomnia is the default mode network throwing a riot in a dark room.
A riot in a dark room. Wow.
Think about a bedroom. The lights are off, no sound, no external distractions. You've removed all external sensory input.
So the DMN has a monopoly on your brain's energy.
Exactly. It uses that massive surplus of energy to time travel. It pulls up every awkward thing you said 10 years ago, every financial worry. The body is exhausted, but the brain is running a marathon of anxiety.
So the brain is keeping the body awake because it perceives an active threat environment?
Yes, the body scan is the ultimate weapon against this because it is an act of neurological theft.
Neurological theft.
It steals the energy away from the DMN. By forcing yourself to focus entirely on your toes, tense them, count to 5, release, count to 3, observe the sensation.
Yeah.
You are giving the prefrontal cortex a highly demanding cognitive task.
And the brain only has so much working memory bandwidth.
Right. If the PFC is fully occupied with counting and processing proprioceptive data, there is literally no metabolic energy left over to power the DMN's anxiety loop.
You are starving the anxiety engine of its fuel. You forcefully quiet the mind, physically exhaust the muscle tissue, and manually shift the autonomic nervous system out of fight or flight.
And the inevitable byproduct is sleep.
That is a game changer for anyone staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m. But what happens when we aren't safely in bed?
Right. What if you're in public?
Yeah, what happens when a crisis hits at 2 p.m. in the middle of a crowded office or in traffic and you feel a panic attack coming on? You can't exactly lie down and do a 20-minute body scan.
Which is precisely why Dr. Selvaraj includes an emergency intervention protocol.
Now looking at slide 8, protocol 4, visualization and sensory anchoring. We shift from daily maintenance to acute crisis management. The visual here is stunning, a perfectly serene mountain lake reflecting the sky, flanked by neon icons representing the 5 senses.
The slide divides this emergency protocol into 2 distinct techniques. The first is visualization.
The instruction is to close your eyes and vividly reconstruct a place or person that triggers profound peace and safety. But isn't visualization just daydreaming? How does imagining a lake stop a physical panic response?
We have to return to the foundational rule of the amygdala. It cannot differentiate between a vividly imagined scenario and physical reality.
Right. We established that imagining a stressful event causes the brain to dump cortisol.
So visualization is simply reverse engineering that exact same biological machinery for your benefit. If the brain reacts to an imagined threat with stress hormones, it must react to an imagined sanctuary with regulatory hormones.
So if I close my eyes and vividly imagine the smell of the pine trees, the temperature of the air, the sound of the water,
Your brain processes those imagined sensory inputs as real data. The amygdala registers the safety signals and immediately downregulates the sympathetic nervous system
it stops producing cortisol.
and begins synthesizing serotonin and oxytocin. You are chemically shifting your brain state using directed imagination
But there is a very real challenge here. Sometimes the panic is so intense that the mind fights back and you can't hold the image of the lake.
because the internal environment is too chaotic.
Exactly. That brings us to the second half of the slide. Anchoring. The protocol states, when the mind aggressively wanders, force attention back via the five senses by identifying surrounding colors, distant sounds, or tactile sensations.
Anchoring is the absolute failsafe. When internal visualization fails, you must ground your nervous system in external objective reality.
I visualize the aggressively wandering mind like a kite caught in a hurricane. The DMN is the wind whipping this kite around violently, entirely out of control.
It threatens to snap the string.
Sensory anchoring is like grabbing that string with both hands and tying it to a 1,000-pound boulder. You force your brain to find a specific color like, that coffee mug is navy blue. You forced your hand to feel a texture. The seam of these jeans is rough.
That is an incredibly accurate description of the clinical mechanics. By forcing the brain to process objective, real-time sensory data, you act as the heavy boulder.
You're forcing the prefrontal cortex to come online.
Yes. This technique is so biologically effective that it forms the foundation of acute trauma therapy. Clinical psychologists teach this to veterans suffering from severe PTSD flashbacks.
Oh, like the 5-4-3-2-1 method.
Exactly. Forcefully identify 5 things you can see, 4 things you can physically touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. It forcefully reboots the PFC and slams the door on the amygdala.
It is the ultimate emergency brake. So we've covered the massive biological burden of the wandering mind, the neuroscience of the autopilot, the manual override, and 4 highly specific protocols.
Now, we have to look at the bottom line.
Right. So what is the actual return on this time investment? Let's look at slide 9, the ROI of practice, mind and emotion.
This is where Dr. Selvaraj moves beyond symptom management and outlines a fundamental upgrade to the human operating system.
Let's look at the mental health column first. The slide lists a measurable increase in working memory and razor-sharp focal capacity alongside an expansion of baseline brain energy and creative problem solving.
That phrase, expansion of baseline brain energy, is critical.
I really need to interrogate that. Are we saying mindfulness physically gives you more energy than a cup of coffee? Is it literally generating energy?
In a very literal metabolic sense, yes. It comes back to how the brain utilizes ATP. When you live your life on autopilot, the DMN is constantly running in the background.
Processing endless hypothetical scenarios.
Yes. That background processing requires a massive, continuous supply of glucose and ATP. Your brain is exhausting itself, running a program that serves no useful purpose.
It's like having 50 tabs open on your web browser. Even if you're only looking at one tab, the other 49 are secretly draining the computer's RAM and battery life until the whole system crashes.
Exactly. So mindfulness does not magically create new energy out of thin air. Rather, by training the mind to stay anchored in the present moment, you are forcefully closing those 49 background tabs.
You shut down the wasteful processes of the DMN.
And suddenly your brain finds itself with a massive surplus of metabolic energy that was previously being wasted on anxiety. That surplus ATP is then redirected to the prefrontal cortex.
Which explains the measurable increase in working memory and razor-sharp focus.
Your brain finally has the fuel it needs to perform at its peak because it isn't fighting its own internal friction.
That is a phenomenal shift in perspective. You aren't tired because you work too hard. You're tired because your DMN is leaking your energy.
Precisely. And if we look at the emotional health side of the slide, the claims are equally massive.
It lists a significant reduction in cortisol, which we've thoroughly mapped out. But the next point is incredible. Complete liberation from cyclical anger, fear, and depressive states.
The operative word there is cyclical.
Complete liberation from cyclical anger. That's incredibly bold.
It is bold, but it is deeply rooted in neurochemistry. Cyclical means a process that feeds on its own exhaust. Let's break down how anger actually functions in the brain.
Okay.
When you experience a trigger, say someone aggressively cuts you off in traffic, your amygdala fires and a chemical cascade of stress hormones flushes through your bloodstream. The physical sensation of anger is the result of those chemicals.
The heat in your chest, the spike in heart rate.
Yes, but here is the critical fact. It only takes about 90 seconds for those chemicals to be completely flushed out of your bloodstream.
Wait, 90 seconds. The actual biological lifespan of an emotion is only a minute and a half.
Yes, the initial involuntary physiological reaction has a half-life of roughly 90 seconds.
So why do we stay angry for hours or days or years?
Because of the cycle. After the initial 90-second flush, the default mode network takes over. You start thinking, that driver was so disrespectful. People are always disrespecting me. My boss didn't respect me yesterday.
Oh, wow. Every single time you think one of those thoughts, you re-trigger the amygdala.
Which dumps another 90 seconds worth of chemicals into your blood.
Hmm.
You are angry that you are angry. You're pouring gasoline on your own fire.
And mindfulness cuts the circuit.
Precisely. We go back to the witness state from slide 5. When the car cuts you off, you feel the initial spike of anger. The chemicals hit your bloodstream. But instead of jumping into the cockpit of that anger, you sit in the tower.
You observe it as a witness.
You say, my body is experiencing the 90-second chemical flush of anger. You observe it neutrally. You refuse to generate a story about disrespect.
And without the narrative fuel provided by the DMN, the chemical flush just burns out in 90 seconds, and the anger physically dissipates.
You have broken the cycle. You are liberated.
The power to choose whether an emotion lasts 90 seconds or 90 days is the ultimate form of emotional intelligence. And the benefits go even deeper on slide 10, the ROI of practice, body and soul.
We're moving from the cellular level up to the transcendent.
The visual transitions to an EKG heartline pulsing steadily next to an image of two hands clasping. Under physical health, the slide lists systemic regulation of blood pressure and cardio health,
which is the direct result of shutting down that cortisol drip. Chronic cortisol literally hardens arteries.
It also mentions deeper REM sleep and a measurable reduction in age-related memory degradation. Now, we talked about how the body scan cures insomnia psychologically, but deep sleep cycles do something highly specific to the physical brain tissue, right?
Yes, you are referring to the glymphatic system. During deep restorative sleep, the brain's glial cells literally shrink in size, creating space between the neurons.
And cerebrospinal fluid rushes through those spaces.
Yes, acting like a power washer. It flushes out metabolic waste products, specifically amyloid beta plaques and tau proteins, which are directly implicated in Alzheimer's disease.
So if your DMN is keeping you in light, anxious sleep, the glymphatic system never engages fully. By securing deep sleep, you're actively preserving your brain against aging.
That is an incredible biological defense mechanism. But then we look at the right side of the slide, which shifts into spiritual and social health.
It lists deep patience, genuine empathy, and radically improved interpersonal relationships. And it culminates in achieving the third level of happiness, a profound connection with the broader universe.
That third level implies a hierarchy.
Right. What are the first two levels?
The first level of happiness is hedonic. It is entirely sensory and circumstantial. The fleeting pleasure of eating a great meal, buying a new car.
It's gratifying, but it evaporates immediately.
Exactly. The second level is eudaimonic happiness. This is derived from meaning, purpose, and overcoming difficult challenges. Raising a family, building a business. It's deeper, but still tethered to external conditions.
If your business fails, that happiness is shaken. So what is the third level?
The third level is a transcendent state of being that is completely independent of external circumstances. It is the profound, unwavering realization that you are not your thoughts. You're not your temporary pain.
You are the quiet, infinite awareness that observes all of those things.
When you consistently anchor yourself in the PFC and maintain the witness state, you realize you are a fundamental part of the whole, rather than an isolated ego fighting against the world.
But how does that deeply internal realization translate outward to radically improved interpersonal relationships? Sometimes the pursuit of spiritual enlightenment can seem isolating.
It can, but I would argue that true empathy is impossible until you quiet the DMN. Think about how we usually listen to people.
We're usually just formulating our response.
Right. Our DMN is running wildly. We filter their words through our own insecurities. We aren't actually seeing them. We are seeing a projection of our own ego.
We take their bad mood as a personal attack against us.
Exactly. But when you cultivate the witness state, you create immense psychological bandwidth. When your partner is angry, you don't instantly react with defensive anger.
You have the space to observe their behavior and realize their anger isn't actually about you.
It's a manifestation of their own internal chaos. That shift from automatic reaction to conscious response is the birth of genuine empathy.
You become a sanctuary of calm in their storm rather than just adding more wind to the hurricane. That is a beautiful synthesis. Which brings us all together perfectly on slide 11, The Synthesis, a Holistic Lifestyle.
This is the culmination of the clinical guide.
The visual is a glowing core labeled Total Wellness, uniting body, mind, emotion, and soul. The slide specifies the daily commitment, 20 minutes a day. Set this time aside ruthlessly for yourself.
Ruthlessly is a very intentional word.
I have to pause on that word. It is such a sharp word to use in a presentation about empathy and inner peace. Setting time aside ruthlessly sounds almost selfish.
It sounds selfish because our modern culture has deeply conditioned us to believe that constant output is the only measure of worth. We feel guilty if we take 20 minutes to sit in silence.
We feel we should be answering emails or serving someone else.
But to carve out 20 minutes of pure neurological training requires a ruthless defense of your boundaries. You have to be willing to disappoint people in the short term to secure your own sanity.
It is the ultimate application of the airplane oxygen mask analogy.
Exactly. The flight attendant tells you to put your own mask on before assisting others. If you don't ruthlessly secure your own oxygen supply, you will pass out, and then you are of no use to anyone.
If you don't ruthlessly secure 20 minutes a day to train your PFC, you will suffocate under the burden of a wandering mind.
You will bring your chronic stress into every interaction. Being ruthless with your self-care is a prerequisite for being genuinely generous to others.
And the philosophy at the bottom of the slide perfectly captures this. It says, meditation is not a tool to escape from your problems. It is the ultimate mechanism for building the capacity to face them.
I cannot emphasize the power of that paradigm shift enough. When most people attempt mindfulness, they treat it like a mental vacation.
They close their eyes and try to hide from the storm.
But this guide violently rejects that. Mindfulness is not a hiding place. It is a forge.
You are not running away from the storm. You are actively building a stronger ship.
Yes. You use those 20 minutes to do the heavy neurological lifting. You manually engage the PFC. You recalibrate your baseline tension. You train the witness state.
You build capacity.
So that when you open your eyes to face the absolute chaos of your reality, you have the biological and psychological armor required to handle it without breaking.
You stop surviving as a victim of your autopilot and you begin actively commanding your life. Which leads us, finally, to our conclusion on slide 12. Live with awareness, achieve total wellness.
As we wrap up this exploration, I want to leave every listener with a final thought to mull over.
Please do.
If the default mode network has truly been running your life on autopilot up until this very moment, constantly hijacking your attention, pulling you into past regrets, and projecting you into future anxieties, what incredible, beautiful parts of your actual reality have you been entirely asleep for?
Oh, wow.
What moments of connection have you missed because you were trapped in a timeline that doesn't exist? And what will you notice on your drive home today or at dinner tonight now that your prefrontal cortex is finally back in the driver's seat?
That is a staggering question. What have you missed, and what are you going to finally truly see for the first time? To discover more secrets of optimal health, subscribe to the Pirananellum YouTube channel.
Yes, definitely do that.
Share your breakthroughs and questions in the comments below. Wishing you all a healthy, wealthy, and long life.